Hi, I'm Captain Audrey Arnold. I am currently stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State. I'm the IMA to the Senior Intelligence Officer at the 62nd Air Wing on McChord Field. McChord Field hosts the largest C-17 air mobility wing in the Air Force, as well as on the Army side, the First Corps and various other Air Force and Army units are here as well, but those are the big ones. Prior to this position, I was stationed overseas in Okinawa, Japan, as my last active duty position. I worked at Kadena Air Base, and I spent 5 years learning how air power plays a role in deterrence of other nations' militaries. Additionally, I had extensive experience there working in a joint and multinational planning cells for large-scale exercises in various countries throughout Asia. As for what made me think differently about warfare, I think the article Understanding War's Enduring Nature Alongside Its Changing Character really made me start to think about how technological and social change over time can change things when it comes to war and the nature of war. This article talks about how technological advances could be driving changes in the nature of warfare. According to Clausewitz, the nature of war is enduring, meaning that the essence of war itself is unchanging. However, the character or the way and means we use to manifest war in the material world changes. So the nature of war itself doesn't necessarily change according to Clausewitz, but the warfare, the methods we use does change. Some say that the violence that came along with waging warfare was a product of the technology at the time throughout history. And so, however, we have greater communication technology now than we did during the Revolutionary War, for example, and we still use violent means to push our political objectives. And we used to use, hundreds of years ago throughout history, violent means to conduct warfare. And the idea or the thought was that the reason we as humans behaved that way is because it was a necessity to push our own objectives. But we still use a violent means in a lot of cases now, which kind of made me think. I started to ask myself what came first, the chicken or the egg, when it comes to this topic. After reading this article, does the violence come first because it's human nature, and because of the technology we have, or does the political agenda then drive the violence? Which is it? It seems to me that during this modern era, we are more likely to be able to achieve the political objectives without the violence, and it is made for a more peaceful world. But I think it is still human nature to use violence to execute warfare. So, although we are seeing the most rapid technological advances when it comes to communication that the world has ever known, I think it's unlikely that those advances will truly end violent wars anytime soon. But this article really made me think about, why it is we still have war and why we do it the way we do and why it is in some ways a necessity and in some ways human nature. I think moving on to the most critical issue we have today, I went with the most critical issue in the context of national security and warfare, and I think it is the vulnerabilities found in the cyber and space realms and the implications that those vulnerabilities, have on our ability to execute or inability to execute the mission. The cyber and space realm is vast and growing exponentially, and we as a U.S. military do not currently have the cyber and space forces available and trained to combat this issue when it comes to our near peers capabilities. So the question becomes, how long can we rely on diplomacy and politics to keep the cyber threats at bay? And are we truly keeping them at bay, or are we, as you know, or is American society just unaware of what's really going on? I think that space and cyber is truly an issue for the Air Force, so an air power issue, if you will. And I think that we need to question whether or not it's possible for us to advance at a rate fast enough to catch up with our peers, and what it'll take, what steps we need to take to get there. We have a lot of work to do in this department, and I think it starts with the baseline education for the total force on cyber capabilities and skill sets that we could all learn more about and not necessarily take action on, because I know we aren't all necessarily super capable when it comes to the cyber technological department. And then space, of course, is a whole nother area that's constantly developing, and I think we're going to see a lot more with that in the near future. So that's all I have. Post your responses and questions. It's nice to meet you all. It's raining here in Washington, as you can see. Thanks.